OBE Journal 2017 Part 3. Good morning. And welcome to the out-of-body world, set of realities, spatial illusion, the place where we are when we're not here, the place where many of us are. And part of the reason I'm doing this, not the only one, obviously, as I said in the beginning, I'm inspired by my various colleagues, both present and past, and would like to contribute to the Rainbow Bridge that is continually making a more secure connection between the worlds, between the planes. Many of you, many of us, who have what they perceive to be occasional out-of-body experiences, consciousness projections, lucid dreams, whatever package and metaphor you wish to use, have them, as I say, occasionally. And I've tried to provoke people by saying, what do you think's happening on the nights when you're not having an out-of-body experience, when you appear to be sleeping and maybe just having the average earthbound anxiety dream about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow? Or even, some shameful episode from one's childhood getting relived or whatever. And because it's been my perception, intuition for many a long day, or many a short day, that we are actually, most of the time, we just don't remember. And why people don't remember, there's a variety of reasons. They wish to continue on with their comfort zone life without being attacked with perceptions and dimensions that can be upsetting. They wish to make progress at a certain rate, that is, their inner self, their higher self. They don't want to rush into this and become unbalanced, which one can do. And a slow, steady pace is best, perhaps, for them. And if that means once a month going out of body, approximately once a month, and having interesting and challenging experiences, wondrous experiences, then so be it. But I'm trying to do this every night, or every morning after every night, to show that there is an ongoing, program, ongoing experience. In fact, one might even call a day-to-day life, because when you're out there, it's not necessarily night there. It's night here, and you're asleep, and it kind of helps if your body's pacified. Although one can certainly do this in meditation or recalled meditation. There's, as I say, this experience comes in a variety of packages, and it has a diverse nature, as our society does, as our characters do. And there are many ways, I won't say to skin the cat, everyone will get upset if I say that, but to peel back the outer layer of experience and see the inner functioning mechanism of what's going on. And certainly some water always helps. Now, I'm trying to continue on from where I was a little bit 2 nights ago, not last night. I'll have to do a quickie there. I can see a problem's going to be trying to cover it all. I'm not going to be able to do it. By day 6, I'm going to still be doing day 3. So I'm sorry, but there will have to be some editing. I can't see any way around it. Um, but we'll try to get the gist of it all in, the essential gist. Um, it would seem, yes, I'm plugging back in now. It would seem that I felt it, the inner me, the inner teaching me, who's not necessarily the fellow that's just got out of bed and talking to you now. It's about 5:40 right now, I think. And uh, went on to some of the sites, astral plane sites, that are more or less permanently situated vibrationally close to the various areas of conflict and civil war around the planet. Spirit does this very conscientiously, usually ahead of time. They know when something's going to start. And I've written about this before, both in my books, More Adventures in Eternity and Eternal Life and How to Enjoy It, and well, others too, and posted things online. They're often set up like refugee camps, sort of, so that when people are drafted to them, either in unconsciousness by spirit guides that take them there, or in some level of grief and or maybe even relief from getting away to these places, they are set up rather like people would expect them. And you've seen refugee camps on television. We all have. These will be the better class of refugee camp for sure, but they will look like a refugee camp. And again, it's that whole astral plane thing of setting up not just reception centers, but areas. Uh, when I say areas, I mean geographical locations with the accoutrements of nature that the various cultures and levels of society will be comfortable in. So you've got your small California towns by the coast that we saw. You've got your large, impressive, architecturally impressive cities, which we'll get to later, and you know, nice little German villages by the Black Forest, and beautiful, craggy, perched villages on the edge of rock faces, as you sometimes see on the coast of Italy and Greece. And, you know, cabins in kind of snowy mountain valleys for people who love that sort of thing. Anyway, many things are set up for you. You don't know they're set up, but they are. Because people on the astral plane tend to be, kind, compassionate, and want to serve you. And because that's part of that's where they're at on their journey, being of service. So the refugee camps. Of course, there's one over Aleppo, and that's where I'm at. And it looks like, some of it looks a little bit like Aleppo used to look like. And then it's like as I can see, it's kind of like a facade of parts of Aleppo with what can I say, rows of nice large tents that you can stand up in. Let's put it that way, and made of a material that makes them look like a tent, and open fires. And they don't seem to give off a lot of smoke, but they've certainly got fires. And, a settled community with people, cooking and children playing, and such as we've seen in, we see terrible shots of, camps underwater, and it's cold and there's not enough braziers and, gas, heaters and whatever they have. And this is well set up. They don't have to contend with terrible weather. and it's the astral plane after all. And the people, some of whom know they're dead, others whom I'm not quite sure, it's a comfort zone for them, and it's of course it's a temporary comfort zone. They're moved on when they're ready. When I say moved on, you get this feeling of we're not talking soldiers with rifles shoving people here. No, no. It's more like United Nations bureaucracy with people sitting behind desks. Like, well, how many of your family is here, and how many is still back in the war zones, and can we help you find somebody? And because guides do that, people that are dead or sometimes dead under rubble can't be found. Um, and although there are ways of doing it, and I have done that myself, there are ways of when you learn the trick of making yourself very small in your astral body and kind of whipping through little holes and finding people under rubble and they're covered in it. They're dead. The physical body is there, covered in rubble, crushed in some way or other. But the astral body, they don't. Their identification with the physical body is such that they think, oh, I'm here under this rubble, or I'm dead, but their astral body's not. And you sort of coax the astral body out of the physical body, or something that's out of it, in a sort of a coma, and show them through a variety of tricks that they're not actually covered in rubble because they're on a slightly higher vibration in their astral body, which is not oppressed by concrete, rock, timber, whatever. And a little nod to Bruce Moen, whose books many years ago kind of awakened that technique within me, although I think I sort of knew it. A lot of us learned from Bruce things and his books and his website, afterlifeknowledge.com, how to do this through discussion. And I'm still in touch with people that I knew many years ago on that website, such as David Pierce and many others. And we still discuss our various adventures or lack of adventures and relate them to things we talked about 15 years ago. And we're part of a small but growing army of knowledgeable people that do not live in denial, do not live in ignorance, and pursue these expanded consciousness adventures with great relish. Now, so there's all that sort of goes on. And if there's someone, a family member from the war zone, like Aleppo's receiving right now, or sorry, not right now, I guess it's Raqqa right now, slightly a month or so ago, one would be standing in front of what looks like a UN bureaucrat at a desk and saying, in their language, of course, not mine, I'm yapping away in English here, they won't be doing that. And, my niece is still down there, or my cousin, or my uncle, or my, whatever. And they don't know what, they're too troubled themselves, and confused, and, to do this kind of exploratory work. So the person that looks like a bureaucrat takes the notes, and later they get passed to either permanent astral residents that are doing this kind of search and guide work, or people like me and others who are out of body ready to help. And there's a mixture of both. When you do that, you tend to defer to the ones that are permanently out of, because if there's just been a battle, there'll be quite a few dead bodies on both sides. Some of them without heads, unfortunately. But the astral body's got a head, but they don't always quite. There's a lot of mixed up identification of which body am I in. They don't really know. One of my pet peeves is churches and religions will not let us teach, and for thousands of years will not let us teach esoteric wisdom. And right back to the mystery schools in Egypt, and if you want to go even farther back than Egypt, like I said in the poem, From Egypt to Greece, it was down on a cross, like a clue in a crossword created by Christ. And we've known all this stuff for like thousands of years, but church always doesn't want you to know that. They want you to be ignorant and pray. And call us shamans, call us guides, call us what you want. We're more like people should be taught this because we have to confront all this stuff when they're dead and they don't know anything. They're hopeless. They're like little 3-year-old kids when it comes to esoteric teachings. And esoteric teaching is that we have a number of bodies. We don't just have one. We don't just have the physical body and the resurrected body. There's about another 4 in between at least. And anyway, it drives us up the wall. But that's religion for you, hopeless as usual. And uh, keeping knowledge from people instead of giving it to them. I've been fighting it for thousands of years. And I have guides that say to me, Gordon, stop fighting it. And I go, God, it drives me nuts. Why shouldn't it? And they're more attuned to, let's work with this ignorance. I'm like, let's get rid of it. Anyway, that's my little that's my little cross to bear. And so a lot of that stuff goes on. I mean, tons of it. I mean, it goes on endlessly, and sometimes you'll find yourself participating. For many, many years, I will read, I have read, as is my wont, books by psychics that are perhaps self-trained, unaffiliated with, the larger schools, the larger, schools that teach out of body stuff in a series of graded classes, and they're very serious and careful about it. The Monroe Institute's one, of course. We all know about Monroe. And there's others, of course. International Academy of Consciousness. There are many. Check it out on the web. There's lots of them. There's more than you think. So a lot of that does go on. People don't always remember doing it, but they have little hunches here and there. They have little mini memories that go, oh yeah. And one of the most common things that I get from people, emails and messages, is, Gordon, I had this and that experience. What do you think's happening? And they'll have a vague memory of doing something that'll be dressed up in one of those metaphors that our brains love to slot onto things to make it more confusing than it actually is. And I know all the signs. And I will say, no, that's a retrieval. You're doing a retrieval. You picked up an old friend in a classic 50s car and drove off, and it went up into the sky. That's a retrieval. You were standing in a bus stop, and another person comes by, 2 or 3 people come by, and you all get on the same bus, and then you sit down beside them and tell them where to get off. That's retrieval. The brain puts many metaphors onto the act of retrieval. Many, many, many. And I've been at this for so long that I can recognize them all, or most of them. And so a lot of you are doing this. Be assured that you are doing this. And just because the brain cleverly puts a little metaphor out of some novel or some movie that it remembers, and it puts a metaphor on it because the brain doesn't understand this stuff. The brain is developed within your head. As when you're a fetus, when you're a baby, and it's filled with belief systems that well-meaning mothers, parents, grandparents, educators put onto it. And you can be sure nobody in kindergarten is going to tell you about out-of-body experience, at least not yet. Now, I do notice children's books do talk slightly about this sort of thing, and try to keep track on that. And obviously, I haven't got time to read a lot of children's books, but I've come across a few that are slightly more enlightening because children do this too, a lot more than you'd think. Because that 5-year-old girl that's taken her first piano lessons and baseball games, some of them they go out of body and do stuff like this because when they're out of body, they can touch the eternal essence of who they are as a spirit, which isn't a 5-year-old girl, of course. Anyway, small point. So if your kids tell you this stuff, watch out. They're probably doing it. I think mostly what people get, most parents get, is children talking about, a granddad coming for a visit or grandma, and having little spirit friends that they play with in the garden, that sort of a thing. But retrieval work does go on, be assured. Um, there's the. I'm not really doing any retrieval work. I'm just going to this refugee camp above Aleppo, if you like, um, to illuminate it for you. I'm not really doing anything particularly active on this. I'm not, but I have done in the past, and also with earthquakes. And I've written about this in the past. The result of earthquakes is similar to a war and bombing. It's collapsed buildings, crushed bodies, people under rubble, or water, even quite a lot underwater, especially with the tsunami. A lot of people underwater there, and that's another story. But the identification of such, if they've died quickly, is that they're still in the body and they don't quite get it. They assume they're dead, uh, despite whatever sensory experiencing they are having, darkness, quietness, nothing going on, um, a consciousness of something, but they don't know what. Um, or sometimes, their strong religious faith will make them sort of realize, no, life is forever, and I'm dead, but I'm not dead. There's many ways of positing these paradoxes to one's indwelling consciousness. And the first thing that happens is the pervasive belief system that has been adopted unconsciously by the being in their childhood, youth, adulthood, which will be some combination of ancient folk beliefs um, that will be somewhat pagan in nature, or the overlay of religion, or the overlay of atheism, rejecting religion. That's the kind of three things you get. And I noticed folk beliefs on several occasions in my years and years ago. I remember visiting Iraq during the Iraq War, which retrievers we did many times, and coming across some a small, I mean, battalion's way too big, 10 or 12 Kurdish soldiers that had been killed, and they had a very strong folk belief, divorced from religion, um, of what they could do as dead soldiers uh, in the level of the ghosts, to help their living comrades. And I came across them, and they understood almost immediately who and what I was doing. And I asked them if I could be of any help to them, and they said, "No, thanks, we're fine. We know what we're up to." And I realized that they weren't reacting. I'm not sure if they were Muslim or Christian. It doesn't really matter. They were not reacting to religion. I could feel that they were reacting to traditional, what I will call folk beliefs, divorced from whatever religious teachings they may have been subjected to at any point. And they understood about ghosts and being an active ghost, and what you might be able to achieve through, some kind of telepathic or dream level contact with your still living comrades. And then, if you've read the book, you'll know I later came across some Iraqi women that had been forced into sexual slavery by the ruling elite, or elements of the ruling elite. I'm not just mentioning, the three or four guys whose names you will have heard of. Um, you know, you're going to be my girlfriend, kind of story, and they're forced into basically prostitution. Um, Although, I guess if you're a captain or a major or some guy in the Secret Service, the girl might get a half decent life for a while, but they're still forced into it. Anyway, they were reacting to a Muslim belief system, and they were, when I interacted with them, they said they couldn't go to heaven because they were fallen women, essentially, whatever their phrase would be for it. And I kind of dodged around them by telling them that there was a halfway place in heaven for women just like them, and I could take them to it. And somebody thought that was a good idea, so off we went. So you can see the two things happening there, and all part of the retrieval work that one practices. and one always learns more, of course. And so we're walking around the refugee camp, and as I say, it's a well-run, clean, ordered refugee camp. Nobody's, lying in a puddle. Nobody's, there's no babies covered in mud. It's a refugee camp, and it looks like one, but it's, upgraded. And people are happy to be there because they're thinking it's going to be worse, much, much worse. And it's the astral plane. It's nice. It's not too hot. It's not too rainy. It's not too cold. It's not too anything. It's just nice. And there's plenty of food. And what they're coping with mainly is the grieving of families split. Some dead, some alive. And as a retriever, I've worked with this, not on this particular occasion, but when you're actually working sites like earthquake sites. And this is where the belief systems of retrievers comes in. I have no qualms about telling people that I find, let's say it's day 4 or day 6 after an earthquake, and you're working a certain area, a certain building, a certain street, so, and you've removed some souls already from their battered and broken bodies, but there's others that are injured, and they're in some kind of, if there's any kind of first aid or half-assed hospital, they're there, and with their injuries, broken legs, whatever, crushed ribs, yada, 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 close to death, but not death. And there's a lack of drugs, and there's a lack of this, and there's a lack of that. And the doctors and the nurses are, of course, doing their stellar work, as these people always do. And it's much harder than what we spirits do, because they're still physical. And I salute them always. Wonderful souls that they are. Even if they don't quite get what's going on, they're totally dedicated. So, day 4, day 5, day 6, you're hanging around where the makeshift hospitals are, and the people are sleeping, they come out of their body, and they see you and they talk to you. They might think you're an angel, they might think you're this, they might think you're that. And in the course of your discussion, and they may recognize you from the night before, they will say, you'll ask them who they are, and they'll be a member of a broken family. Whether it's mother, father, child, grandfather, uncles, cousins. In some countries, extended families are very tight and live close together. And and I feel it's appropriate to tell these people, and I've done it many times. Listen, you don't have to go. See that body down there, that broken, battered, bruised body? You don't have to go back to it. You're asleep, and you can stay with me, and we can leave. And that body will just pass naturally from a state, from its semi-vegetative state into, a state of complete decay. And they might like the idea, being reunited, and they might feel it's irreligious, it's against their teachings, it's suicide, and I will tell them, there'll be an ethical confrontation that I will try to handle. And some will come on with me and some won't. And but I feel it's important to provide them with that opportunity, regardless of whatever belief system they've got, And I've other guides that are not from my cultural background or my, series of incarnational experiences won't agree with that. They will have ethical issues about that are more influenced by the religion that they adhere to. And so we don't set out to argue with each other, but we do have individual takes on what is necessary or important or appropriate. And I remember this reminds me of the series of channelings I did from Jesus and Maitreya around 2007, published in the book Jesus and the Christ, And at some point, I was channeling Maitreya to a group of students, and he said something, much to my surprise, because they didn't give me notes ahead of time. I just went into channeling mode, and it happened. Um, Talking about the ascended masters being sometimes like, although they have a very high consciousness and are not attached to personality or ego, um, they have different approaches to solutions to or possible solutions to uh, the situations posed by the evolution of consciousness in bodies on the planet, i.e., our lives. Um, and he said something about the ascended masters don't always agree on what to do about certain, uh, shall we say, planetary wide consciousness issues. And he said we're sort of like members of a board of directors of a large corporation, sitting down having a discussion and not necessarily agreeing. I mean, they certainly don't fight and argue over my solution's better than yours. They're way past that, but that still doesn't mean that they agree on everything. And they have to kind of hash it out. Well, let's try this, let's try that. But it was just interesting to hear him say that, and talking about revelatory even, and it's in the book somewhere. You'll have to look, and it reminds me of what I'm telling you about retrievers having minor, ethical disagreements on what to do at certain times with injured, perhaps very close to death people. So something else to watch out for on your own scale of adventures. So that's the some I'm being told to mention, or I'm being reminded that some of this retrieval areas over other war zones, civil wars, and as you know, there are several in Africa right now, and there's been one over certain areas like Kenya and Congo, where there's been intermittent civil wars for over natural resources, particularly diamonds, gold, and all the rest of it, for quite some time. I mean, not just 5 or 10 years. So there's areas where there are reception centers set up, and there are other areas in the old spiritualist books they would call the lower astral, the almost hellish type realms that are very close to Earth and get the vibrations of violence and anger and destruction from Earth. And there are areas where there are, the ghosts of dead soldiers still fighting, not knowing that they are dead. You'll see this in accounts of spiritualist accounts of retrievals in World War I and World War II, where they've come across some dead soldiers who are really realizing that they're dead, and they're looking for a way out to heaven, and you can guide them. I'm thinking of Lord Dowding's book Lishgate. Many accounts of that there, and it's obvious from what these soldiers will say that they've just left an area of fighting where it's actually ghosts that are fighting, not physical men. But the ghosts don't realize it, and they're sort of going at it like robots, just mechanically going through the motions of, arm wrestling, punching, using guns, knives, etc., etc., and thinking that it's all still happening. And because belief systems are so strong, it is all still happening. Although the dead can't really make the dead any more dead than they already are. So that happens in Africa. I've been there, done that, or been around it and watched it. And because these ongoing conflicts, and Libya is another example, although not quite as long as the Congo or Kenya, and I can see some of you will be saying, "Gee, this guy really knows a lot." Well, some of you guys know it too. You're just not remembering, and that's what I'm here for. I'm helping you remember, and so just understand that that's going on, and the refugee camps the fake, in refugee camps that are nicely set up by astral plane helpers to assist those souls. They have to be very careful in these active war zones to get them vibrationally far enough away from what I have just described. Else there is a bit of, interaction that's unpleasant and has to be continually shoved back, like waves of violent energy coming toward the refugee camps, and various astral plane permanent residents have to know how to push that energy back. And it has to be done on a regular basis. So another note there, these things do keep occurring to me as I'm nattering on. And so we're back still at my initial experience. And here we are, day 3, and I'm still trying to describe it. We can see the issues we're going to run into here, can't we? And that's a sort of a quick tour of that situation. And then on that same night, I did project, because I quite like it and I know how to do it, into the formless energy planes for a brief R&R outside of my astral body, my mental body, my causal body, and into that transcendent area of consciousness where one is not a body at all. One is barely a consciousness. Well, you are, but it's extremely vague and cloud-like. You are spread thinly, but very conscious and active. And I've written about these things many times, and I'm mentioning it now because you will experience this from time to time. And it may be extremely brief and intense and blissful and filled with light and amazingly powerful for a few seconds. Although it's probably longer than a few seconds, but that's all you remember. And you're in the formless energy planes, close to higher self, maybe not merged with higher self. And as I have said, a drop of water in a sea, a sparkle of light within a sea of light. These are the old metaphors, and they're functioning and they work, and that's what you are. And you're completely divorced from who you are in this incarnation. I'm not Gordon, and I'm not really anybody that I was before. You're the actor on holiday. You're not any of the people that you were. You're not any of the forms of consciousness that you maybe were before you were a person, a fish, a bird, a river, a tree, any number of things, because higher self does project its consciousness into all these sentient forms at various times in the history of the planet. And I hope that's been established. And you're there, and you're omniscient, and you're omnipresent, and you have no desire to have ambitions and go down there and achieve things. That's what it's all about, learning and achieving. And there's times when you don't have that desire at all. And I re-experienced this that night just for the sheer blissful pleasure of doing so. When you first go latch onto that experience, it's totally, I was going to say demoralizing, overwhelming. But as you get used to it, you can do it a little better. And then you sort of go, okay, that's enough, and you come back out of it again. And certainly we do it between incarnations at certain points. But you can also do it when you're out of body, just for the night. And I did it then, and I'm telling you now, and it's quite wonderful. And it was then, but I recognized the need to exit and come back to Earth and play the game, which is what I did then, and it's what I'm doing now. And we're getting to the end of part 3, and I wish you all well, and keep those questions coming on in, and we'll get back to this hopefully tomorrow morning at dawn. And for now, so long.